already had it recording. I think it's probably just as well. Or I get in trouble. This idea of the robe, I think the most important thing to take away from the early account is what the robe consisted of. So it very much spoke to the Dharma teaching of non-attachment. So the material that would go into the robe consisted of scraps. And the more undesirable the material, the better it was for the purpose of forming a robe that a monk could wear. So that there would be nothing of value there, nothing to attach to. It was entirely utilitarian clothing. Since they didn't have suntan lotion yet, and we are talking about India. So they needed some protection. And the practice of sewing, of course, because they were working with scraps of cloth. They weren't going to Joanne Fabrics. I don't think they're with us anymore, but back in the day, and ordering up a nice piece of fabric from which they could cut it. They were just grabbing pieces as they could and sewing them together. So that part of the story really is pretty inspirational. I always found it to be. And while they were taking cloth from dead bodies, I've never heard of that taking place in our time. As far as we seem to go, are getting remnants. That's our version, 21st century style. We get remnants. But it's the same basic concept. And then there's a story about the design of the robe. You know, how does all these strips, what's the point of all that? And the story has it that because this was happening in South Asia, it was in imitation of rice fields, which were seen to be quite beautiful. So we can only imagine if this tradition had been established in America. Maybe instead of rice fields, it would have been potato fields. We would have been sowing little sprouts and thinking that was pretty beautiful. I mention this simply because it's kind of an interesting coming together of just the particular circumstances of that time that create a tradition that's come down to our time. So it's kind of, it's nice we chanted Sandokai. It's kind of a coming together of the relative and the absolute. The fact that the circumstances of the birth of this robe sewing and its continuation in other Asian countries for many, many centuries before it makes the trek west, that in so many respects, it took on the flavor of that culture, that society at that time. Just the important thing to keep in mind that, it could have been very different. It's not that there's something especially holy about these things. And Shahakri speaks about this in this chapter. It's a representation of the Dharma. And of course, the Dharma talks about impermanence, interdependence. And the robe is a great example of that. Its interdependence in its origins and how it came here. That there were Japanese teachers that brought it here, and they brought these traditions with them from Japan. And while most of us wouldn't know a rice paddy if we saw one, I might. It's been a long time since I was in China. And that was some 20 years ago. When I was there, I got pretty good at recognizing, oh, look at the rice paddies as the bus is driving by. Aren't they beautiful? But, these don't have so much meaning for us. But there's a universal aspect to it, the sewing practice. And as I mentioned, I think last week about the chanting, because we were looking at the three refuges. So there's an interdependence there between the sewing of the robe and taking refuge. A beautiful interdependence. So even though the story behind this is different time and place, it's still a rich practice, which is why we have so many sewing teachers who, because of the work of figures like Tamoy and Blanche, continue to share this wonderful practice to our time. And of course, the other figure who looms pretty large for us as being within the Soto Zen tradition is Dogen. Because if Dogen had looked at that and said, that serves no purpose, we wouldn't be doing this. Let's be honest. So Dogen is really the key figure in this web of causation, of interdependence. Because when Dogen was in China, and we know this from his own writings, he was blown away by the robe chant and the practice of robes, sewing them, wearing them, and the role they played. And this is a quote from Dogen, and from one of the Shobogenzo fascicles that's devoted to Zen sewing. It's the virtue of the Kesa is the title of the fascicle. And in that piece, he says, at that time, which is when he was in China, and he first experienced this at a temple, at that time, I felt that I had never before seen such a gracious thing. My body was filled with delight, and tears of joy silently fell and moistened the lapel of my robe. We've talked about ritual before, and this is part of ritual. When we, on Saturday morning after our first sitting, we will do this robe chant. And then those who have practices will, during the chanting, put them on their heads. And then at the conclusion of the chant, we'll take and put it on. And it called to my mind my deep immersion in ritual was during the 3-week practice period I spent at San Francisco Zen Center, and they had way more ritual than what I practiced at Udambara Zen Center, or that gets practiced at Jukai. And they had a service before lunch. There was the morning service, but then before lunch there would be a service. And I was really just this is fabulous. So I go back to the bar, we need to start because I could relate. My feeling was similar to Dolan's. I thought this was just the most wonderful thing. And we did it for a few times. They humored me. Kind of faded away. But the impact that ritual can have, because it's a way of embodying the practice rather than just studying it where it becomes conceptualized. But when we can actually do it, I'm frequently bringing Whitehaven into this, but it's really part of how I approach what I do there in terms of the meditation that we begin with, but then I have the handing out of the chocolate, and then we chant Om, and I describe it to them as in terms of now that you've meditated, you're ready to do these embodied practices. That if we started with it, it wouldn't be as meaningful. And they get that. They recognize that's in fact the case. But through the practice of Zazen, when we do ritual, then it's a much deeper experience because we've opened ourselves up to it. We're ready. Oh, when we become Buddhists, and this is from Shahaku's text, his own comments on this, and that's kind of what happens during ordination. You know, they certainly wouldn't have seen this because there were no isms, I don't think, back then. Right? But they would have seen it as just a follower of the Buddha. And I think that's a better way of expressing it because of the impact that the isms have had on us. So that's one of the reasons why I've always been a little reluctant to identify myself as a Buddhist. Zen feels better because there's not a Zenism, and it just means meditation. So I'm comfortable with that. And Zen Buddhist, for me, just means I'm a meditating follower of the Buddha. Okay. But ism is some sort of ideological palace that I've created where I hang out. That seems to miss it entirely. So the isms and the ists, I kind of back off from. But when we become followers of the Buddha, we receive the okesa or the rakusu as a symbol of our faith in the Buddhist teachings, the Buddha's teachings, and the ancestors. So, from the teaching of the three bodies of the Buddha, there's the Dharmakaya, which is the Buddha nature, that which is universal. So that's our symbol of our faith in the Buddhist teachings, which are simply seen as opening up for us the true nature of reality, of my own being. So as we practice, this is how I found it to be. I study the Dharma and I continue to practice with it. I use it. terms of how I live my life, how I see things. And it works. It seems to me to be a very accurate depiction of the world and how I can best live my life in accord with the way of the world, in a way that recognizes the great value of the world. The fact that it is sacred, divine, the ultimate, the absolute. And I feel nurtured by that. I feel like I do find refuge there in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. I do find refuge in this practice with the robe. It's not that it's the essential piece. And this is where I find Dogen's teaching so helpful. That Zazen is the essential piece. So to have the correct relationship to the robes is dependent upon our Zazen practice. And it's easy enough to see how the robes, being a point of distinction, the origin story with the Buddha addresses that. So people can tell, they can distinguish between the Buddha's followers and others. So without the grounding of this practice of Zazen, it can lead to some issues, some problems of getting caught up in the distinctions and attaching to them. So this Shahaku's own teacher, Uchiyama Roshi, in his famous teaching of opening the hand of thought, we wear the robes with an open hand so that we're not creating something to cling to. Then they become a problem. Because if we receive the okesa as a symbol of our faith in the Buddhist teachings, then as Shahaku describes this further, this means we also become free from ego attachment. So now the okesa is a symbol when we're free of ego attachment. There's no problem. No problem at all. There are distinctions in reality. The problem becomes when we cling to it, when we attach to it. The teachings of impermanence can be very helpful to us in that regard. Our distinctions change very much over time. In fact, roles can get reversed. Parent-child roles. Just one example. Teacher-student roles. It gets embodied in a dharma transmission where the teacher actually, there's a sequential bowing of student to teacher, but then a teacher to student. So it gets enacted there, but actually doesn't require dharma transmission. It's kind of the interdependence between teacher and student. For that relationship to be alive and well and vigorous, it has to be kind of a mutuality, the flow back and forth. So the robe can be a beautiful part of the practice, free of attachment. And Shahaku in this chapter also talks about the stories, especially within the Zen tradition, of the transmission of the robe, going back to the first transmission from Shakyamuni to Mahakashyapa, and then down through each subsequent teacher to Bodhidharma, who brought it from India to China. And then, when it comes to China, and it passes through the first six ancestors, there's a well-known story that involves Huineng having received the robe of the fifth ancestor. And the fifth ancestor had instructed Huineng that he should probably make haste because the rest of the temple won't receive this news very well. So he follows his advice and departs, but there's a group of monks that are soon hot on his trail, and they finally overtake him because they want that robe. He was this illiterate young guy who all of a sudden comes in and then within a fairly short period of time makes off with the succession, the dharma succession. And Huineng removes the robe and lays it down for this retired general who's the leader of this gang. Here's the robe. But the general couldn't lift it up. Powerful story involving the robe. I was a little surprised Shahaku didn't delve into that in this chapter. He mentions the ancestors and the sixth ancestor, but I guess he left just kind of implicit, figuring people that give talks about it will pull that out maybe. But yeah, this sense of what the robe represents. And the problem that arises when you do turn it into something to cling to grasp. So it was Huineng's robe because he saw the true nature of reality. He demonstrated that in the poetry contest back at the temple. So the robe really is just a symbol of that. And one's focus always needs to be on the dharma, not on the externalities. So it's Dogen who encouraged us to sew our own ocases so we can blame him or thank him, because it really is a wonderful practice. So I think that's pretty much uh, what I wanted to get across about this chapter. But there's some other things that Shahaku mentions in here, and if you have any questions or comments about that, or just questions, comments about what I've presented here tonight, we have some time remaining, so love to hear. John?
This is just historical more than anything. Well, I don't know. Historical may not even be the right word. Do the other, do Tibetans and Theravadins Soa Rakusa?
No,
I don't.
not to my knowledge. I think this
Okay,
is
it wasn't to mine either, but I was curious.
Yeah.
Certainly Tibetans wear something like an okesa, their
right,
saffron robe.
right.
But I don't even know that Theravadins even wear that, do they?
Well, it depends. They do, like if you go to Thailand, but as far as Vipassana practitioners in the West, no. I mean, the figures like a Jack Kornfield or Joseph Goldstein.
And those were the folks that I was thinking
Yeah,
of,
that's right.
that I've had contact with, and
Right.
none of them seem to.
Right. Because, I mean, I think another important point of distinction, and this is one that also impacts Zen more and more, is that distinction between a monastic and a layperson. So that within these other traditions, the monastics will wear robes, but lay practitioners, no. And even within Zen, there's a kind of a growing movement towards having lay teachers. Because, that's kind of the way I see my role. It's one of the reasons why I don't generally wear full robes. That, the Rakusu itself seems to be the appropriate way to go for a lay teacher. So this certainly serves the role then of embodying my commitment to the Dharma, to the practice, and so on, but not trying to portray myself as being a monastic, because I'm not. So there is that, and who knows what Zen will look like in this country, because it's largely a lay practice.
So what I keep reading is American Zen is still developing, and we don't know what it's going to look like.
Right. So speaking of Tomoe Katagiri and Minnesota Zen Meditation Center, I mean, I understand coming straight from Karen that their wearing of robes is kind of really gotten reevaluated. And we're talking about one of the major centers founded by one of the major Japanese figures who helped to spread Zen practice here in this country. So it just seems like a natural evolution to me, because it's one that came very naturally to me, and I didn't think I was some sort of wild eccentric about it. It just felt right.
Dean?
Yeah, right.
Clinton has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, please go ahead. Thanks for Brandon knows how to get my attention.
I watch, I learn. My investigation of Buddhism is a very new thing. And I wanted to ask you if the two sources I was preparing to use were of value or I should look elsewhere. And the authors I questioned, one of the names is Charlotte Joko Beck, and the other one, okay, I see your reaction. That one's a good one.
Yeah, it's very strong. She's a wonderful teacher. Every day Zen.
I haven't gotten into the books I have available yet.
Okay.
It's two of the two books that are of her teachings. Her first book, that you just named is not available in the library. I'm going to have to get a copy of that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The other author is a John Dido Laurie.
Yeah. Yeah, he's had a big impact on me. I mean, I've only been out there twice for weekend programs, but his impact far exceeded that because I've been practicing long enough that there was no streaming when I started practicing, but I could get cassette tapes mailed to me from Dido's center that he founded. So I'd get those monthly. I subscribed and I read their journal and I read Dido Laurie books. So he's a very important teacher.
Thank
They're
you.
both Charlotte Joko Beck and John Dido Laurie, two very trustworthy teachers. You'll get good guidance there, I think.
Thank you.
Anything else? Well, I'll just put in another plug for a Jukai ceremony so we can actually experience what we're talking about here. And part of it gives me an opportunity. Another thing that Shahaku doesn't mention too much, if anything at all, about is the receiving of a Buddhist name. Along with the robe. So that's also an important part of the practice. And that also has a lot of variation in terms of how people work with their names. For many people, that becomes the name they use. And for others, including yours truly, most of you don't even know my Buddhist name. That's okay. You don't get penalty points over it. But neither of my key teachers, Diane Martin was Diane. Mike Newhall was Mike. Even some major teachers. Reb Anderson is Reb. So Norman Fisher is Norman. So it varies. But if somebody goes by their Buddhist name, then that's how I will always address them. Because I have deep respect for that. Jeff?
Does that come from the Chan tradition?
Buddhist names?
Giving
I don't know the history to that well enough to even attempt to answer it. Because of course, we now have Buddhist names for all those figures. But what they may have gone by, I doubt it. I don't think the Buddha was known as Shakyamuni. So, Yeah. It's just one of those things, the way traditions get established whenever it was. And then they kind of stick. That's the fact that they have stuck. But the variation is, and I think this is healthy, you know, each individual kind of decides for him or herself if they're going to use it or not. And even Mike, some of Mike's Dharma heirs use their Buddhist name. You know, the one we're most familiar with is Mado. Barbara Mado Anderson. So I call her Mado. And some who are just priests, like Taisha. And yet, you know, the teacher they're studying under doesn't follow that. Some people find that helpful to them in embodying the Dharma. So that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
I've been trying to figure out for the past 7 years why I like my Dharma name so much. It's for people who don't know, it's Shinmon. And I just something came on the news about a Rastafarian who had their dreadlocks cut in a Louisiana prison.
Yeah.
And that it just dawned on me that my Dharma name it sounds Rastafarian.
Right. Hey, man.
Even though I don't have dreadlocks, but it sounds cool.
Hey, man, it's Shinmon.
Shinmon. I never figured that out until this week. I'm a slow learner. Anyhow, I thank you for my name.
All right, well, I hope I'll see you on Saturday. We'll certainly be putting it out there over Google Meet too, so even if you can't be at the Zendo. Although I recommend that. It's a beautiful thing to be able to be present for. But I hope you can join us for it either way. All right. Go ahead and chant out. I vow to myself and to each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings, to live on earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume, to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, the future generations, and my brothers and sisters of all species, to support others in their work for the world, and to ask for help when I need it, to pursue a daily practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows. Good night, everybody.